And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib. We are here for a special Thanksgiving edition, not quite, of the First and Goal podcast. Here to break down Week 12 of the NFL season, the season right before Thanksgiving, or the week right before Thanksgiving, as we are really hitting the final stretch here, Laraib. It's getting kind of sad, honestly, when you think about it. We've already gone through 12 weeks. There's only 7 weeks left, really. And then we have playoffs. Playoffs are awesome, but the more you get into the playoffs, the less games, the less teams, the less football. And that's what we love talking about, watching every single Sunday. So we're just enjoying it while we can. And we're getting to some really exciting matchups and really interesting stuff to break down as we head towards the final stretch of this season. And we predict these games, every week. We give our picks for all of them, and it's kind of stupid anyway. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Let me go ahead and share those stupid picks from last week.
It's all
It
luck.
looks a little bit closer than it actually was. My Browns, who came to me in my sleep and told me we are winning in Cleveland, came up with a huge upset, and that kind of sealed the deal for the week really early on, despite me losing the Seahawks Cardinals game and the Monday night game. I still pull out the victory, making it 6-4-2 with 6 weeks left or 7 weeks left. And Chicago really stinking close to pulling off that upset in overtime, but my Vikings pulled through in the end and gave me the victory for Week 12.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get mad. I picked the Pittsburgh Steelers to beat the Browns, and they didn't do it. Egg on my face, I guess. Credit to you for the epiphany coming out. A team that you put in your top 5 teams last week when we did this episode. You also picked to lose to the Cleveland Browns, so I just don't know where you get this head from, but it works for you. You're up, so whatever, loser. Um, Anywho, let's go ahead. Let's move on to some more interesting stuff right now. Monday Night Football last night, really exciting game. The Ravens pulled away in the fourth quarter, so it actually, it looks like a one-score game. A lot of ebbs and flows, a lot of excitement in that game. But let's go ahead. Start. Ravens win 30-23. Lamar, really solid game here on the road, especially after a lot of the backlash he got from his performance last week against the Steelers to, come back in a huge spot Monday Night Football and really dominate that game. Not a ton of support from Dehan, 140 yards, but really kind of got that going late when they were putting the game away. But overall, very impressive performance by Lamar and this Ravens team, especially their defense, Rob. Arguably, and we'll get into some biggest questions for contenders later, but a lot of questions about this defense, this pass defense, especially. And the Chargers really quick start, got out of the gates, immediate, Justin Herbert touchdown. It was like, uh-oh, here we go again. But they buckled down. They really, stood firm against this Chargers rushing attack. And they just never allowed the Chargers to really have success in the red zone and just getting, moving the ball consistently. A lot of that, also on this lack of talent from this Chargers team, which, I'll let you get into. But overall, just impressive performance by the Ravens. Great bounce back. Keeps them firm in the race for the AFC North at this point. So, huge win, exciting game. Good Monday night, Laura.
Yeah, the Ravens just playing super aggro, right? Went for it on 3 fourth downs and converted all those on fourth and short opportunities. And that was their game plan. They said we're gonna come in and big bro is gonna handle little bro. And that's what they did in this game for the Chargers. Like you mentioned, just a defense that has been playing way above the names on the sheet for them. And they really came back down to earth in this game when you face a guy like Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And so, we knew this was going to be a sort of a rebuilding year, resetting culture, but they've exceeded those expectations so far, and they're still looking, solid for a playoff spot. And so they have that to look forward to. But this just looks like a team who's still, missing a big wide receiver with 2 hands to catch the football offensively, and then another big name besides, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, 2 guys who always banged up and in the latter half of their career. So go Ravens, I guess. But my Chargers with Justin Herbert, you know, he is still him. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever question that. But just not at the top just yet.
Yeah, and then you brought up a good point. Like Harbaugh, when he took over the 49ers, he immediately flipped the culture year one, but he didn't have the talent. And then those next few draft classes, being familiar with a lot of these guys from college, coming from Michigan, and then when he was in San Francisco, coming from Stanford, it was just knowing all these late round picks, these guys hiding in the weeds, and just really buffing up the talent on the roster until they were playing in the Super Bowl, albeit against his older brother who got the best of him once again. But yeah, overall, really exciting game. The Ravens just confirm that they're still a legit contender in the AFC, and we're going to treat them as such because they have Lamar, because they have Derrick Henry, and it's just the Ravens culture. If there's any team I can see at least a defensive unit rebounding in the second half of the season, it's the Ravens. I mean, it's a lot of young talent in the secondary that I feel like with more reps can get a little more disciplined. But their front seven is still very good. They're really good at rush defense, which is huge in the playoffs when it gets cold outside and it's harder to move the ball through the air. Having that stout run defense really will help them in the long run. So overall, pretty good results from the Ravens. But let's go ahead and talking about contenders, Laraib. Let's go into our main segment of the day. I call it the biggest question marks. We have our top 5 contenders pretty easily, 3 from the AFC, 2 from the NFC. I think that we can agree on here. And if there's anyone you want to add at the end, by all means. But Rob, I'm going to start by asking you a team that we consider a top contender, and what is just a big thing you're looking at, a weakness or a question or something that you feel like this team needs to prove to you by the end of the season that can prove that they're a legitimate playoff team. And if this thing maybe isn't proven or answered, then that could be a huge red flag entering this year's playoffs. So, Laura, I want to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. What, in your opinion, is the biggest thing that you could potentially see providing a pitfall for them going forward?
It has to be their wideouts, Lewis, their receiver position. Now we've seen Patrick Mahomes win Super Bowls, lose Super Bowls with guys like Mecole Hardman on the outside, but this has just been a year where they've even been even more down than previously so in the last couple of years offensively. Right, Travis Kelce just getting older and older by the year. You have Noah Gray, who you have to really rely on in a game against the Panthers, having to catch 2 touchdowns. When you have Juju Smith-Schuster coming in as like your number 1 guy, you have to trade for a 30-plus-year-old DeAndre Hopkins. Rashee Rice is out for the season. Hollywood Brown was IR. He's going to miss the whole regular season. They're going to find a way to win a game. No doubt about it with who they have. But it's just question marks like who's going to be the alpha guy to really step up when they're down big in the playoffs. We know Mahomes is going to do it with his legs. We know Travis Kelce is a different beast when it comes to the playoffs. But I'm looking at that second or third guy is Hollywood Brown. Whenever he comes back for the playoffs, who is he going to be in this receiving core? And Juju Smith-Schuster and the rest of their guys, how are they going to continue to keep on stepping up?
Well, I actually think it's interesting. Not saying I don't agree with you because the wide receiver room definitely lacks talent, especially when we look at some of these other contending teams. But something to note, since DeAndre Hopkins has been acquired, Mahomes, after a really shaky start to the season, since that time period, so 5 weeks ago when he was acquired, Mahomes is 3rd in the NFL in touchdowns. He's 5th in the NFL in passing yards, and just overall a lot more efficient. And if you take this 5-game span and you blow it up to the entire season, 41 touchdowns and 9 interceptions on the year from Mahomes. So I'm not going to go ahead and overreact to the lack of weapons because I really feel like the Chiefs just will find a way, like you mentioned. The thing that I need to see by the end of the year is, can I just see a complete game from this team? Because I would argue, Rob, the Panthers game, albeit it's the Panthers, so you take it with a grain of salt, but that was arguably one of their best offensive performances of the year. And they've been having better offensive performances, more notably from Mahomes and this passing attack. But it's just now it feels like the defense is kind of slipping. I mean, to have Bryce Young go on basically a game-tying drive and convert the 2-point conversion in a game that you're not trying to lose, and I get it. Complacency is a really hard thing to stave off, especially when you're going for your 3rd Super Bowl in a row and a lot of veterans on the team. how rigorous was the prep and the training going into Carolina? Who knows? But it just, you see a team like the Lions or the Ravens or some of these high tier contenders, when they are in a position like this, they blow the freaking doors off of these teams. And for the Chiefs, it's like, does it always need to be so hard? Because guess what? If you're playing this, just don't let us have the ball in the end. Like, you can't, kill us. We're gonna fight, fight, fight. It's football, man. Like, all these really tight games, a ball can just not bounce your way. Bad luck happens. Penalties happen. It seems like they favor the Chiefs more often than not, but you know, you can't keep playing this just high risk, high reward style. And it's like, oh, well, we play this way every week because it prepares us for these close game situations that we're always locked in. But it's like, why make it hard on yourself? Why not practice playing with a lead? Why not practice, blowing? I don't know, just things that expand your team. Where it's like, and you look at the Bills game last week, they're just, playing around, playing around, playing around. And it's like all of a sudden you're down 9 points in the fourth quarter, you get the touchdown, and then Josh Allen scores again. And it's like, oh, shoot, that's the game. And that could easily happen in the playoffs. So what I'm asking for the Chiefs is give me a well-rounded performance, offense, defense, both clicking, and blow a team out, for God's sake. You got the Raiders this week. Lay the damn wood.
Well, it also is a thing where when they face a lot of these teams, it's that team Super Bowl, right? The
That's
Carolina
fair.
Panthers, we're at home. We're going to face the two-time Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to practice a little harder this week. I'm going to play a little harder this game. We got the Raiders coming up on Friday. The Raiders suck ass. But you know what the hell they're going to do? They're going to try their fucking asses off on Friday because they're playing the Chiefs and they love, making fun of Patrick Mahomes' voice. And so it's just an extra level of, playing up to their competition. But I agree with you. This is a team who really we have yet to see and put together a complete game, but we know they're built for January and February. So we'll see that, Lewis. Now I want to ask you for this team. The Philadelphia Eagles are playing great football, 7 wins in a row. They look like a really good roster. But what I want to ask you is, what is their biggest question mark?
I feel like there's an extremely low hanging fruit here that if I don't, pick it, it's going to knock me in the head. And that's obviously the head coach, Nick Sirianni, and just his game management, his antics, his temper, everything that involves the Nick Sirianni experience is terrifying if you're a Philadelphia Eagles supporter. Because, even in the game against the, last week against the Rams, where it's like there was a play that I didn't really understand it. It's 4th and 3, or it's 3rd and 3. The Rams don't get it, but there's a holding. And it's like, we could either make this 4th and 3 or push them back 10 yards and make it 3rd and 13. This is Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Like, the odds that they wouldn't, convert a 3rd and long. It's obviously, they didn't get the 3rd and long. But it's just like these weird game management decisions. And then he puffs his chest out and he's so braggadocious about it. It's hard for me to have confidence in a Sirianni Hurts combo when they're just two so polar opposite personalities. I mean, the reason that I'm bringing this up, and it's not a bigger issue, is because the overwhelming talent of this Eagles team has propelled them to where we're considering them a top flight contender in the entire NFL. But that is the biggest question mark for me.
And I'm gonna go in a different direction since you hit on head coach. I'm gonna go secondary. They have Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Darius Slay. And you think about and also Avonte Maddox playing in the slot nickel, and then Chauncey Gardner Johnson in the playing safety. But the issue I saw was their cornerback number 34. As soon as Darius Slay goes out of that game, they are just exposing him. And this is just a secondary where I feel like they have to continue, especially with 2 rookies. You talk about guys who have no playoff experience, and that experience that, no savvy vet, to really help them out when you go deep into the playoffs. When you talk about situational awareness late in the game, the different things, the nuances of playing quarterback, tugging on somebody when you have position for the ref and they can't see that, or, deep pass interference calls late in games. So this is just a part of the thing where I feel like they can really be exposed, especially when we saw Cooper Cup go for 80 yards, Puka Nakua torched them for 100 plus. I feel like there's a world where they can be had. And Brandon Graham out for the season, Fletcher Cox, he's out of there. And so you really rely on your young guys and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, who've been playing really good football. But when you make that deep playoff push and you're not getting any pressure through your front seven, that secondary, I feel like, has a chance to get exposed. And that's why I'm going to say that is probably their biggest question mark.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, especially when it's these high stake playoff games and it's these young, secondary guys against these top flight, veteran quarterbacks, Goff, even, guys like Kirk Cousins and just some of the more experienced quarterbacks in that conference where it's like they could really give you trouble in these bigger moments. So that is a good point. But let's go ahead, Laraib. Biggest question mark for the Buffalo Bills for the remainder of the season is.
It has to be that rushing defense. Now, this is a team who has only lost 2 games. And in those 2 games, we saw Derrick Henry rush for 199 yards. And in the other one to the Texans, they didn't give up too much on the ground, less than 100. But still, in those 2 games, I saw them being exploited on the rushing attack. And you think about the teams they will have to face in the playoffs, the Chiefs with Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt in the backfield. The Ravens, of course, with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. It really feels like they need to shore up that rush defense. Now, Matt Milano, I think he's gonna be coming back sometime this season, and so that's really, he's a
Our
huge,
guy.
huge fan, or we're a huge fan of his.
He's
Not
probably
sure
a
if
fan
he's a
of
huge
us.
fan of the First and Goal podcast, but it feels like that's where they can really try to help themselves or try to get better. Sean McDermott has done a great job with his defense so far this season, but I just feel like that rush defense is where they're lacking.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the middle of the defense, especially just that void and getting guys back. And McDermott just is so good at just shoring up the defense, no matter the names or the talent. But the talent is where my biggest red flag comes in because outside of Josh Allen, and maybe you can argue like Ed Oliver, maybe James Cook, who are the just high level talent guys on this team? Who are the top 5 of their position? Who are the all pros? Who are just the no doubt pro bowlers? There's not a lot. It's kind of just, well coached, methodical, a lot of Josh Allen, a lot. And he's been playing awesome football. But in the playoffs, when you need a play to break your way, a guy to break a tackle, a defender to just shed a block and make a huge play in the backfield. Where are you getting that with this Buffalo team? And that's my concern is just the overall talent level of this roster. Can they compete at the highest stage? Because we saw, early on in the season against Baltimore, they got blown off the field by the Ravens, and the talent mismatch looked apparent between the two teams. So against some of these, and the AFC has a lot of teams with just higher overall talent. Even the team like Pittsburgh or Denver, just, they have guys on both sides of the ball where it's like, man, he's a stud. He's a stud. And I just don't see that around the roster. A lot on Josh Allen. And if he's, suffering, having a not a great game, that could really affect them. So what can they do to address that is just, keep playing in your scheme, the great coaching, and then just, spectacular plays. I think guys like Amari Cooper, like Keon Coleman, James Cook can emerge as stars, but it's just going to take time. It's going to take the rest of the season for them to really gel. And I have confidence in Buffalo, but that's my biggest question mark.
All right, let's go ahead and flip it back to the NFC, Lewis. I want to ask you the Detroit Lions, maybe the hottest team in the NFL currently. What is a question mark you have about them?
It's the head coach quarterback combo of Jared Goff and Dan Campbell. And it feels honestly disrespectful to say this considering how good of a story these two guys are. Just reclamation projects, really likable guys from who were passed on, just downtrodden, and now they're playing elite football, coaching elite football. But let's just call a spade a spade. Jared Goff is not a top 10 talent of a quarterback in the NFL, of just overall talent. You have absolute monsters in their primes playing football right now. And as Jared Goff, he just has these Jared Goof type games where if he's getting a pass rush, he's not gonna be able to elude the rush. And if their offensive line, which has been stellar, isn't winning consistently, like let's say for example, they play a team like Philly in the NFC Championship, and Jalen Carter's winning repeatedly on the inside, and they're not able to run the ball. It's going to be a lot on Jared Goff and these receivers who are fine. I really like Amon-Ra. Jameson Williams has come on well. Laporta's really taken a step back this year, which is strange considering the success of their offense. But that's my biggest concern is, can Jared Goff deliver in these huge moments where honestly, the Super Bowl, 5 years ago, the NFC Championship game last year, failing to deliver. And then you flip it over to, I said, Dan Campbell as well. I love the guy. It's hard not to love Dan Campbell, but he sometimes just is too aggressive or he overthinks it and he's not aggressive enough in spots. Can he stack up to some of the, awesome coaches in the NFL as well? It just, it's a lot. The sample size of them in the playoffs isn't huge anyway. This is really going to be their second extended playoff run. As we both predict, they'll probably have the 1 seed. And if they're going to get 4 playoff games under their belt this year. But I just think there's a ceiling with that combo, right? At least right now, there's a ceiling with that combo. And they need to prove that they're above that for me.
That's interesting. I'm gonna go with their pass rush, Lewis. Ever since losing Aiden Hutchinson for the season, it really looks like they have not generated that much of a pass rush. You bring in Zadarius Smith, he gets a half a sack on Anthony Richardson last week, but they released James Houston today. And so it really feels like this is a team who's going to struggle. Now, their front seven is excellent. They are very good at stopping the run, but to be able to generate pressure on a quarterback, I think that's something that they really need to figure out this season, especially when you talk about facing a team like the Eagles, who they are going to have to go through, or the Eagles have to go through them. Think about that great offensive line that they have, all those big bodies, giving Jalen Hurts a lot of time in the pocket, opening huge holes for Saquon Barkley. I really think if this this Lions team wants to go far, it's going to be through their pass rush and how well they can play, especially when you have guys like Brian Branch in the secondary, Terrion Arnold, who've been playing better and better every single week, especially Brian Branch, looking like already a top 5 safety in his second year. It doesn't matter how good your secondary is if the opposing quarterback can stand in the pocket as long as he wants it. And the thing that really sticks in my head, Lewis, is that game against the 49ers from last year where Brock Purdy just standing in the pocket and that deep ball down the field to Brandon Ayuk. And that just flipped the game right on its head. And that was from not being able to generate any pass rush. And so I think that is where this team is really lacking.
And that was with Aiden Hutchinson as well, which is important to note because he obviously is out for the rest of the year. But yeah, that's interesting points. And like we're saying, we're poking holes into these awesome teams, like trying to nitpick. So don't come at us. You probably thought the same thing if you're a real fan. I remember when I had a really good football team once upon a time, and I saw the small things here and there that could be exploited. Now it's just everything, but who cares? Finally, Laraib, one other team. We mentioned them in the Monday Night Football, but the Baltimore Ravens. What is your biggest question mark?
My biggest question mark is playoff Lamar. I am a huge supporter of Lamar Jackson. It looks like he's on his way to winning his 3rd MVP, but let's be clear, he is a great regular season quarterback, and he is at best average or below average as soon as those big time games come up in the playoffs. Excuse me. You think back to that Steelers game, a huge game just last week. And, he just has these boneheaded plays. And I don't think that's entirely all his fault. I think that also comes a little bit on Harbaugh's head. You think back to the Chiefs game from last year where they only ran the ball less than 10 times against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And so I just feel like this is a team who takes a step back in the playoffs, especially Lamar. And it's just going to be on him to continue to play his brand of football. Now, when you get to the playoffs and a team has 17 weeks worth of film on you, knows your tendencies, knows which way you like to scramble, knows who you like to throw to when you're outside the pocket and things really break down. That starts to get tough for Lamar. But if he really, because if he wins a championship this year, Lewis, we are talking about a guy whose resume is already top 10. Him and Mahomes already, would have or are going to cement themselves as top 10 of all time. And so this is a year where it's really exploitable. We talk about the team like the Chiefs, who, now they're going for three. They're a little bit tired playing, this playing in February for their third year or trying to for their third year in a row. A team of the Bills, who you mentioned, great coaching, but maybe not all the talent in the world. This kind of feels like a really good shot for the Ravens. Can they put it together all this year? Can you figure it out in the playoffs in those big moments? And, that's something we'll have to see.
And I agree with you 100%. And I was thinking about, I actually wrote down Lamar because I figured you might go the secondary or maybe John Harbaugh or something like that. I agree with you. And it's a point. I feel like as a football society, we're a little too protective of Lamar. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just year after year, we destroy guys like Peyton Manning, like James Harden, like these sensational regular season performers who fall off completely come playoff time. And when it comes to Lamar, he's now in the midst of a potential third MVP season, just playing lights out football. He has all the pieces, but it's just something to say when every single year, and you can look up the stats, when he comes to the playoff time with Lamar Jackson, every single time, the least amount of points you score in that whole season is your final game. That's no good. Last year, 14 points against the Chiefs, least amount of points I scored all season. The year before that, well, he was hurt the year before that against the Bengals, but the year before that, against the Titans, dud. Against the Chiefs, dud. Against the Bills, dud. And it's at one point, even if they lose this year, and it's the defense, it's, oh man, we couldn't stop the Bills. It was 38-35, awesome game. Lamar played awesome. I feel like I will take that. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're a Ravens fan, you want to win, and we're talking about as a team how you get to the Super Bowl. But from a Lamar conversation standpoint, we need to see him perform in the biggest moments because, as you even mentioned, a huge moment for a team would be a division rival who sees you a lot, who has your tape, who has your film, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you kind of never really show up in those games either. So when it comes to these teams who see you year after year, the Chiefs, the Bills, who, to be fair, you destroyed earlier in the regular season, but when it comes to playoff time, what are we going to expect out of Lamar? I have high hopes for him. I've seen him evolve this year as a passer in the pocket, just maturity. He is just an awesome leader, awesome human. I think that's maybe the reason why it's hard for us to really go in at him the way we do, like a James Harden or someone like that, because not really the greatest humans either. But it's like, man, at some point we got to get it together. So I'm looking at the next matchup against the Steelers in 2 weeks, and even next week against the Eagles, as these are big games. And you could even say Monday Night Football was a big game, and he delivered. But we need to keep delivering, keep putting our best performances forward, and especially come playoff time, this is your time to prove it to us, Lamar.
Well, Lewis, I think we looked at some of the question marks for some of these teams. Let's go to something a little bit more hopeful. Looking at
Hey,
the MVP race. Last 7 weeks of the NFL season, we have two guys really at the front running, and then a couple guys towards the latter half. But let's go reverse order, Lewis. I want to ask you for your MVP race, who do you have at your number 5 spot?
I really didn't want to put this guy. And I was looking at some of the names, trying to get cute, trying to find something. But it is Patrick Mahomes. And he's been playing better football as of late. Like I mentioned earlier, his numbers have, dramatically increased since the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins. He keeps pulling these games out in the fourth quarter, which you have to give him credit because he's the reason they're winning these games. the scramble against Carolina last week to put them in field goal range, that's Mahomes, you know? And a lot of these other big games this season, when it's a really close game, he finds a way to win. You have to give him credit. Obviously, his counting numbers are far and away, not as good as some of the guys we're going to mention. And even, from numbers of his past, but he's obviously an MVP talent. He's pulling out these games. They have the tie for the best record in the NFL. I have to give him a mention here in the top 5 MVPs.
For my number 5 spot, I'm going to go with Jared freaking Goff. They have scored 50 points, Lewis, twice this season. And it's been through Jared Goff and him just being able to hit guys, in stride, being able to play within his offense. Great rushing compliment, of course. But whenever, when this Lions team faces those bad football teams, you just know Jared Goff is going to have those perfect touch passes. And, not to mention he's played in some tough games too. You think about that Houston game where they're down 16, he throws 5 picks. He still leads them on 2 huge drives toward the end of the game to help them win. And then you think back that huge divisional game against the Green Bay Packers where, it's outdoors, it's going to be raining. This is where Jared Goff turns into a pumpkin. No, he didn't. They leaned on that rushing attack. Jared Goff hit his guys, and I think he deserves to be here and the number 5 spot.
Yeah, he barely missed my list. I don't have him here. And, he has had awesome games, but there's been a lot of times this year, like a game against the Titans, where they put up 50 points, they look awesome, and he has less than 100 passing yards and he's really not asked to do much. So am I to sit here and say he's the most valuable player in the league? No, he threw 5 interceptions in a game and they freaking won. So it's hard for me to say that he is an MVP candidate, given I don't think he's the most valuable player on his team. I don't think he's the most valuable part of his offense. I think that offensive line, maybe Penei Sewell, is more important than Goff. But you can't deny he has been extremely efficient. You can have the talent and you might still be able to fumble it, but he's been elevated with the Tide. My number 4 here, Laraib, and I think we might get pretty similar going forward. I have Justin Herbert to have 7 wins. And man, watching that game last night and these receivers and these running backs and just the overall talent of this offense, it's hard not to see Justin Herbert willing this offense through these games. And we just talked about what Jared Goff has compared to what Herbert has. It's night and day difference in terms of the talent level surrounding them and what Herbert's been able to do. Obviously, shaky start to the year and entered the year with an injury, but he's been playing awesome ever since. And even last night, just like the plays down the field to even like keep them in the game when it seemed like it was out of stretch. I have Herbert here. He's been awesome.
At my 4th spot, I have Saquon Barkley.
Wow.
Yeah, surprisingly, Herbert was left off of my list, but Saquon obviously carrying my fantasy team and carrying your fantasy team and carrying the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, of course, behind a great offensive line, behind the tush push, behind Jalen Hurts and his rushing ability. But Saquon Barkley has come in and revitalized this Eagles team, especially a team from last year who, John Swift had an all right season, but Saquon Barkley is a game breaker. When it's late against the Saints, offenses are not scoring that much. He's just gonna rip one off for 65 yards, and he is superhuman. Just his ability to go over people, to go through people, and then that breakaway speed. I mean, he's had some huge runs throughout this season, and he has been looking like an MVP candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at my number 3, so I'll just go ahead and talk about it. Just what he's able to do to completely change the tone of this team. And, you can look at last year's team and say, DeAndre Swift, they ran the ball well. They have a good offensive line. They don't need Saquon, but his game-breaking ability that you mentioned where, it could be a nip and tuck game. Hurts doesn't really have it. It's real congested, and he just breaks one. And then, boom, this game is wide open. We saw it against the Commanders 2 weeks ago. Obviously, last night or 2 nights ago against the Rams, where it's like he just puts these games away, especially in these second half of games where he's just 7 yards a carry, just breaking these long runs and just wearing defenses out, which has just been playing a huge role in the success of this Eagles team and really transform them. So I can't say enough about Saquon. And running backs are never really going to get love. And, really anyone outside of quarterbacks in these type of discussions for MVP. But man, he has been the best player for this Eagles team, which is arguably a top 3 team in all of football right now. Who is your number 3?
My number 3 has to be Joe Burrow. He's been playing outstanding football. The amount of touchdowns he's had, amount of 30-point games he's had, and then his defense just letting him down week after week after week. Him and Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins doing all they can to keep this team afloat. Joe Burrow's numbers absolutely crazy this year, and it just sucks that they're most likely gonna miss the playoffs. And that's just how it is. That's just how it is for this season. It sucks, especially, it looks like he's going to be comeback player of the year with the way he's been playing. But I just think that his level, this ceiling that he's reached this season has been great. Third in yards, first in touchdowns, and only 4 picks on the season, second in QBR. He's just been playing great football.
Yeah, I mean, if this was purely a who's playing the best at quarterback this season award, which if you interpret the MVP as that, that's not necessarily the worst way to interpret it because that's how it's been dealt. But you can't have a guy 3 games under 500 as your MVP favorite. It just, I can't get there. I love Joe Burrow, obviously, go Tigers, but
it's not his fault. I mean,
and
the
I,
same
yeah,
conversation that you're putting Justin Herbert in at your 4 spot, and next year when this defense plays, even 10% better than what they are right now, Joe Burrow, he would be the clear number 1 favorite in my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree. And literally, it's these like, not only is it just the defense, it's plays. It's little plays every single game. It just feels like they never goes in the Bengals' favor. So I'm glad you mentioned it because he does deserve flowers for his play this season. But I just can't mention a 4-7, a member of a 4-7 team as an MVP favorite. It's against my DNA. But he obviously is playing as I would say he's playing the best football right now of the quarterback position. But the 2 guys I have at my top 2 spots, I had them pretty interchangeable. I ended up switching it at the last second. I have Lamar number 2, Josh Allen number 1. I think we have those same 2 guys, unless you throw Russell Wilson out there or something. The reason I
Yes,
have
man.
Allen edging out Lamar just a little bit is because when I was looking at this top 5 MVPs, I was like, man, I kind of want to give Derrick Henry some love because he's been awesome. He's changed a lot of the foundation of this Ravens team. And because of how big Derrick Henry's been, it kind of feels like the, KD Steph Warriors, where it's like they take away a little bit from each other. Even though they both, complement each other in a huge way. But I think what Josh Allen's been able to do, obviously with less talent around him, really cutting down on the mistakes this year, playing efficient football, and just making huge plays when needed. The 4th down conversion against the Chiefs 2 weeks ago was just an MVP play that we're going to look at the end of the year and be like, that is where he won the award. And obviously a lot of football left to play, but Josh Allen just really willing this Bills offense with nowhere near the talent of this Ravens team. That's what gives me the edge over Lamar, who's been awesome, and he has the better numbers. And I completely understand why you would have those 2 guys switched out, but I'm leaning Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I'm leaning Lamar Jackson. Just his highlight plays that he's had this season. I completely agree with you. Josh Allen has lesser talent, has been having to do more for his team to win. But Lamar Jackson, you think about the 2 crazy plays he had against the Bengals. That first time,
Ooh.
360 spin, bobbled snap, running towards the sideline, and a little sidearm to Isaiah Likely touchdown. Right? Think back to last time he played the Bengals. He's scrambling, goes to the, right tipping toeing right down the sideline to pick up this huge first down. Just barely doesn't get into the end zone. You think back to last night where he's just zipping through 2 guys and then hits a little stop at the goal line, then walks in. I just think his highlights have been ridiculous. We know just what a great player he is in the regular season, and I think he deserves to be the MVP.
Cannot get mad at that analysis, Laraib. But I think it's now time for us to move on to our Thanksgiving Day picks. We're going to be giving picks for 3 games on this Thursday. Not quite Friday. I know there is a Black Friday game, but it kind of messes with the theme. So we're going to be giving out our Thanksgiving picks, starting off, Laraib, with the Chicago Bears traveling to Detroit. Detroit 10.5 or 10-point favorites at home. I think the line switched half a point. Really big line here, especially a divisional game, short week. Don't love the line here. I'm leaning Lions in this game. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Just better talent. This Bears team is just completely cursed 2 weeks in a row, just snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. And I think now going into the Lions' den, I think this game could get ugly fast.
Yeah, I mean their offense has really picked up ever since they let go of Shane Waldron. But that defense, especially last week, just letting Darnold pick them apart however he wanted. I think the Lions, who've been just thrashing teams, continue that at home. I like the Lions to win 28-13.
And I have the Lions here 33-20. Look, I don't know when most people eat their Thanksgiving, right? My family, we lean towards a late afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock time frame. Whenever, and you get that late nap starting to hit. This is the perfect time for you to take that Thanksgiving nap because boy, oh boy, this 3 o'clock game, the Giants at Dallas. Dallas 3.5-point favorites. I mean, golly. Dallas, awesome win last week, by the way. We didn't talk about that. Defeating the Commanders, just crazy special teams plays that really went their way. Missed PAT, 2 return touchdowns. Just craziness in that Dallas game. But now this awful moribund Giants team starting Tommy DeVito again. Players clearly have given up on this season. I just don't. I'm gonna pick the Dallas. I'm gonna pick Dallas. I just think if there was any bright spot for Dallas last week, it's welcome to the season, Micah Parsons. He completely broke that game open and allowed their team to come back against the Commanders. And I think against this Dallas team or against this New York team, no Andrew Thomas, Tommy DeVito. I think Micah Parsons has another outstanding game on Thanksgiving, and the Dallas Cowboys get it done. I'm going Dallas 17 to New York 3.
Yeah, and I'm also going with the Cowboys. I think they play great football, honestly. Cooper Rush, just dealing to the guys he had,
Solid.
taking what the defense gave him, and they found a way to win that game. Now you're playing against a team in the Giants who is clearly tanking, no doubt about that. If they wanted to win football, they would start Drew Lock over
Right.
Tommy DeVito, and that's not what they're doing. I think the Cowboys, who honestly should also be tanking, they
They still
realistically
have a
should
shot. They
should have
still have a shot.
it doesn't matter. They still should have lost that game last week so they can get Shadur. But they'll win this one. I like the Cowboys 26-17.
Ooh, a little higher scoring for I don't know who's scoring for the Giants, but let's move on now to our night game. Pretty interesting game here, Laraib. The Miami Dolphins traveling to Green Bay. Green Bay favored by 3.5. The biggest stat for this game, Laraib, is 28. Do you know what number 28 means, Laraib?
It'll be freezing cold.
28 degrees. It'll be 28 degrees in Green Bay. This schedule makers set the Dolphins up. No doubt about it for this game because they're like, you know what, Miami? Prove it. You had a whole offseason to beat the cold allegations. You can't win and temperatures below 50 degrees. And now it's the tundra. You're playing at Green Bay. Probably, if any stadium in the NFL, the hardest place to play in winter. And boy, is it right now. Miami, this is your time to prove that you have a shot. Tua especially, he's been playing really good football since he's been back, Laurent. They're 3-1 in their last 4 games, and they're starting to really pick up momentum here, albeit against not the greatest opponents, the Patriots, the Raiders. But now you have a shot at Green Bay. Green Bay's been pretty up and down recently. Jordan Love has been kind of wishy-washy, despite the awesome performance they had against San Francisco here. I think if you can run the ball on this Green Bay front, which is gettable. You can definitely run the ball on this front. That's how you win in the cold. And I get it. They have a very speed, focused run game, a lot of misdirection, reverses, things like that. But I think there is a path here for Miami, Laraib. And, Thanksgiving always gives us some exciting games and wild outcomes, as you mentioned to me before we started. And I think we're getting one in this game here, Laraib. I like the Miami Dolphins to pull off the Thanksgiving miracle and finally get that frozen monkey off their back as they win this game 27-24.
And I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. Josh Jacobs had a coming out party last week. I feel bad for you if you did not trade for him in fantasy football with those 3 touchdowns last week. And again, you're facing this Dolphins team who
Value's
you
high.
mentioned it, playing against some of the worst teams in football. Yeah, we're playing good football, guys, right at the perfect time. They are going to march into Green Bay. They're going to get off the aeroplane. It's going to be 25 degrees, and they're going to want to go back down to South Miami, Florida, get back on the beach, right? There's no beaches in Green Bay, I'll tell you that much. Jordan Love is going to
Eerie.
throw interception in this game. It's not going to matter. Josh Jacobs, 150 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns
Woo!
as they run all over this overhyped Dolphins team. Give me the Packers 27-20.
All right, Laurel. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, our Week 12 breakdown. Really exciting stuff that we were able to hit on today. We will not be filming a Thursday episode. I'm just going to put that out there because it's not going to happen. We will make our picks, though, before the Friday game for the rest of the slate. So we will bring that to you next week when we do our recap for Week 13. Exciting matchups this week. Most notably, just want to hit on it real quick. Ravens Eagles. That's going to be a really awesome game that I'm looking forward to watching. But besides that, a lot of interesting stuff to get into. Laraib, you got anything else for us before you head out of here?
Just a happy Thanksgiving from the First and Goal podcast, and I think that's us signing out.
Peace.